Ram Ram Shyamji. Shyamji, what is Nada Yoga?
The word nada means sound, the yoga of sound. The belief is that everything is created with sound, and therefore everything has a particular sound. Everything is vibrating. So we as conscious human beings should be able to hear our own sound. But most of us, we don't hear it because our ears are so occupied by listening to things outside that we don't discover that every sense, we have 5 senses, hearing and touching and seeing and tasting and smelling. They have a counterpart, which is inward. But that only happens when you get satisfied with what you intake through your senses. And when your ears get internalized, you begin to hear your own sound. That's what is called nada.
Thank you. What is the special quality of the sound of your mantras?
I have been chanting mantras consciously since I was nearly 13 years old. I have been hearing mantras when I was in the womb of my mother, because she used to chant. And then I heard mantras in my house also, but they were not doing them properly. They were doing them just as householders do the mantras. It's only after I met my teacher who taught me how to pronounce mantras, how to breathe when you are doing mantras. So I have an experience of now 63 years. I should stop counting, actually. So, when you do something for 63 years, you get good at it. So my voice has a quality that produces an effect. Basically, that effect is for me to discover my higher nature. But in the process, when I chant, and if other people hear it, they also get affected.
What kind of memory is stored in the spinal column?
Well, in the spinal column, you have 3 channels. For convenience, we call them right channel, left channel, and central channel. Right channel is where all your memories from the time of conception to the first 3 to 3.5 years of life, they're all stored in the right channel. And then the rest of your life, the memories are stored in the left channel. And of course, there are some memories that we have from the past existences, past lives. And there are so many studies about that now. They are all stored in the central channel.
Is there any difference between the conception of human evolution in the scientific paradigm and in the spiritual paradigm?
The evolution at the physical level is very accurately observed by the scientists. However, the subtle aspect of the evolution they have not studied because there are not so many people who are interested in the subtle body. And therefore, those people who are doing internal work, I call it spiritual work, they are the candidates to observe and experience the subtle body.
You have taught that in fact we have 3 bodies, causal or mental body, subtle of emotional body and physical body.
Yes.
What is the relationship between the subtle body and the physical body?
Three bodies are very clear because we think with our causal body. Every thought that ever comes to anyone, it comes from the causal body. When you have a thought, it usually is accompanied by a feeling. At the feeling level, it is the subtle body. And when you act it out, then it comes down to the physical. For instance, before you asked this question, you thought of this question. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That was your causal body. Then you had a feeling that the answer that I give you might bring you a deeper understanding. So you had a feeling for that question. Exactly?
Yes.
And now you uttered that question. Now I don't know if my answer is giving you the satisfaction or not, but at least it proves the point that asked question has gone through two stages before you expressed.
Thank you. What is your spiritual concept concerning the scientific theory of the multi-universe?
Multi-universe. You see, what is happening is that they are finding that they call them parallel universe. They're getting close to doubting that the totally materialistic paradigm is not sufficient. I would say they are beginning to sense the subtle body of the universe. So the only way they can phrase that is by saying a parallel universe. But without developing the feeling body, the subtle body, they are not going to understand the link between the two.
What is the main difference between spirituality and religion?
Religion is a system to uplift the mankind to be able to go beyond their personal selfish nature so that they can all get along better with each other, and as a group they will have an identity. It is usually dictated by a religious leader. It could be, you can take any religion and then there will be a leader of that religion, the establisher of that religion. It's basically, they're basically reformers. They want to see the mankind to be able to get along well. Spiritual work is at the individual level. There is totally, you can be very religious and not spiritual at all. And you can be very spiritual and not religious at all. They're totally separate. You can be religious and be spiritual as well. So there are many combinations. But spiritual work is, you see, you have to analyze the word spiritual. The origin of the word spiritual is from the word spirit. Now if you go back, where does the spirit word come from? It comes from Greek language called spiritos. The word is spiritos. Spiritos means breathing, breath. So when you start to study your breath, you begin to discover through subtle awareness what the breath is doing to your inner part of the senses. Once you get in touch with the internalization of your senses, your spiritual work begins. So anyone who claims to be spiritual, and if they do not use the breath work, then they are confusing the word spiritual with religious. That clear?
Yeah, thank you. What could be the purpose of art in the spiritual process?
Yes. Art is of many levels. I divide everything into the chakra system, which is very helpful for me. So there could be a first chakra art and there can be seventh chakra art. You see, the qualitative difference is very important in art. So if the art brings you closer to, for instance, if I go to a museum and I see things and I see things and I see things, and I see that some of them are better graphics, some of them have nicer color combinations or structures. But if any of the artwork, after I see, if it doesn't cause me to close my eyes, it has no spiritual value. If the beauty becomes so overwhelming that it causes you to close your eyes, then it served a spiritual purpose. But that's very rare.
It has something to do with the third chakra or between the third and fourth chakra?
Well, you see, for that we have to first understand the chakras well to be able to categorize them like that. And in a short interview, I don't think you want me to give a lecture on chakras.
All right.
I could, if you call me to Colombia, I can do that.
All right, thank you. How does spirituality influence social evolution?
People who have done some personal spiritual work and were able to become known to the public, they have contributed a great deal. All religions were founded by spiritual people, but they only could bring them to a level where people could reach. Spiritual traditions do not really exist. They are confined to small groups, and they have to be away from the religious, shall I say, setup in order to do the spiritual work. Most people, they leave society and they live either in the mountains or in the forests or with nature to be able to do their spiritual work.
What is the role of sexuality and gender in the spiritual process or evolution?
Well, there are several functions of sexuality. The primary one is to procreate, to have children. Then great pleasure. And then when you start to use sexuality for bringing your awareness to the higher centers, that you need to get some, shall I say, training from some teachers who can teach you how to direct your sexual energy into the higher centers in the body. And therefore, the light from the other chakras, they can then convert your sexual energy to a energy in the heart chakra called unconditional love is the translation. And then that unconditional love turns into a meditative energy for the sixth chakra. And then you can experience the contentment of a kind from where you don't come down.
And what is the relationship between Tantra and Kundalini?
Tantra is just one word. There are many branches of Tantra. Yoga, for instance, is one branch of Tantra. Pranayama is a Tantra. You see, the word Tantra has two components. Excuse me. And the two components are yantra, which means a diagram, and a mantra, means a sound, a name. So a name and a form. Names appeal to the left hemisphere and forms appeal to the right hemisphere. So to engage in any activity where both hemispheres are engaging at the same time, it becomes a Tantra. But then it has a discipline. You have to follow that by the installments of 40 repetitions. You do something 40 times, it becomes a Tantra. 40 weeks, 40 lunar months, 40 years, depending on the length of the Tantra.
And the relation with the Kundalini?
Kundalini is actually a dormant energy, and gradually it starts to manifest through her sister powers. Kundalini has 7 sister powers, each situated in each of the 7 chakras. When all 7 chakra goddesses, we call them, they have contributed to the service of Kundalini, then the passageway is made in the central channel and Kundalini gets stimulated to rise through the central channel and meets her counterpart, who is also dormant, sitting in stasis, in meditation. We call that Shiva. So Kundalini is the Mahashakti, the great goddess. Unmanifest energy. You see, in the creation, some energy is used to create. The rest of it is dormant. For instance, what you will do tomorrow, you have the energy for it. But that energy is not in use today, because you will use that tomorrow. So that energy today is dormant. Right? So now if you put together the next 50 years of energy, it's all dormant. But gradually you use it. And then the leftover of it, that gets stimulated at one time. It's a very dramatic experience that people can have if they work with the Kundalini, which I don't really advise people to do that.
Right. What is the importance of microchakra psychology during the formative years in childhood?
Yeah. Once you know microchakra psychology, then you do things in such a way that help the baby. That, for instance, when you are when a woman is pregnant, she goes to the hospital and she's called a patient, and she's delivering a baby in a laying down posture, which is not a natural posture for delivery, is difficult. And then the baby is being pulled with some instrumentation or hands, if it's a midwife. And then the baby is pulled, and then they clean the baby's eyes, and then the shock of the light, sharp light falling on the face, in the eyes of the baby, it will block the 3rd microchakra in the 6th. So if you know that, it will be helpful not to make that block for the baby. Maybe you can work with a dim light. And there are 49 practices that we can observe. I have mentioned them in my book. It's called microchakras. See? This is now being printed in French as well. And I think after it comes out in French, it'll probably come out in Spanish.
Right. We hope so.
Yes. So 49 microchakras can be maintained open if the suggestions are followed. I just gave you one example. I can give you more examples if you like.
We don't have so much time. And what are people looking for when they take psychotropic substances or mind-altering drugs? And what dangers are there in their consumption?
Yeah. Well, there are two types of drugs that work with the mind. Psychotropics are given to those people who need to relax, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, opiates. They are psychotropics, they contract the mind. Then there is another type, it's called psychedelic, which expands the mind. Now, to some degree, the mind expanding drugs can be useful for realizing that you can have different minds. You know, each chakra has a mind of its own. But normally we think that we only have one mind. But that's not really true. So when they take psychedelic, they begin to experience other minds. So to experience once, twice in your lifetime, it can be helpful. But the danger is that they can become very toxic. Psychotropics actually are more toxic than the psychedelics, but they're both toxic. So to get used to any toxic substance in the long run is not a good idea.
Thank you. And what is true meditation?
True meditation. True meditation is where you are able to see the difference between the self and the non-self. Explain.
Please.
Self in me is the subject, I. Everything else is an object to the self. To me, this microphone is an object. To me, this book is an object. To me, you are an object. To me, you are an object. To me, my watch is an object. My body is an object. My feelings are an object. My thoughts are an object. Because they keep on changing. Self never changes. I am the same I was when I was a year old, a day old, or when I'll be maybe 100 years old. My I never changes. That is the self. Everything else is the non-self. So when you can distinguish and actualize the difference, that you are not these objects. Yes, I live in this body, but I am not this body. I have this body just like I have this watch. So this confusion, to remove that confusion, meditation practices were devised. And that's what I really teach.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.